Good to see you guys. Thanks, Jesse. Good luck to your Eagles this weekend. This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Ed Henry, in tonight for Brett Baer on a historic night in the nation's capital. Divided government has officially returned here in Washington, though President Trump is not giving up the bully pulpit, declaring a short time ago he'll work with new Speaker Nancy Pelosi when he can, but will not give up on his key principles. Democrats tonight in control of the House for the first time since 2011. And while Congress is open for business this evening, key parts of the federal government still closed. That stalemate with the president over the border wall at the top of the agenda. The president renewed his call for the wall a short time ago with help from some of his friends at ICE and the Border Patrol. We have live Fox team coverage, Doug McKelway on Capitol Hill, where Speaker Pelosi will hold a press conference later this hour. But we begin with correspondent Kevin Corke at the White House, where the president just made a surprise appearance in the briefing room to state his case. Good evening, Kevin.
Yeah, evening, Ed. Very big surprise, I would say. We got like a briefing notice, like 5 minutes before he was scheduled to come in. And, of course, we all got a chance to watch it happen live here on Fox News. Now, I can also tell you this. The president taking a bit of creative license today. You may have seen this on Instagram, using a post, sort of taking a little rip off of Game of Thrones. He proclaims proudly there, the wall is coming. Now, clearly that's a bit of lighthearted ribbing, but in sharp contrast to the sober tone that he's struck today in the press briefing room.
I have never had so much support as I have in the last week over my stance for border security, for border control, and for, frankly, the wall or the barrier.
In his first ever visit before cameras in the White House press briefing room, President Trump today took an uncharacteristic step back from the spotlight, letting those on the front lines of the border battle speak for themselves, asking Congress to end the shutdown by funding a border wall.
Anywhere that you look where we have built walls, they have worked. They have been an absolute necessity for Border Patrol agents in securing the border.
We are all affected by this shutdown. We have skin in the game. However, it comes down to border security. And we're extremely grateful to President Trump, and we fully support what he is doing.
Few who followed the politics of the stalemate are surprised by the calcified nature of the shutdown showdown, now nearly 2 weeks old with no apparent end in sight.
Build the wall.
It's been one of the cornerstones of his presidency, from rallies across the country to yesterday's cabinet and situation room meetings at the White House, to a steady stream of tweets, including one that read, "Sadly, there can be no real border security without the wall." A line of demarcation running right down Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House all the way to Capitol Hill.
If he gives in now, that's the end of 2019 in terms of him being an effective president. That's probably the end of his presidency. Donald Trump has made a promise to the American people. He's going to secure our border.
There is no amount of persuasion he can do to say to us, we want you to do something that is not effective, that costs billions of dollars.
Read my lips.
The president's supporters have not so subtly warned him that any retreat on his promise to build a wall would lead to inevitable comparisons to George H.W. Bush's now famed no new taxes pledge. But for all the gray skies and impasse might conjure up, the president's recent willingness to at least talk deal just might prove to be a much-needed ray of hope. Still, the White House is going to need a willing partner in Congress to get something done.
This president welcomes people who have solutions, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and he will have them here at the White House, but they need to listen to the director, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the head of Customs and Border Patrol.
Tomorrow, congressional leaders return here to the White House, Ed, again looking for common ground to end the government shutdown.
We'll see what they come up with. Kevin Corke, live at the White House. Thank you, Kevin. Now let's go down Pennsylvania Avenue over to a brand new Congress with a whole new power structure for the president to deal with. Our correspondent Doug McKelway is tracking it all on a very busy Capitol Hill tonight. Good evening, Doug.
Good evening, Ed. And on this largely ceremonial day, the House is set to take up some urgent business. Two bills that the newly empowered Democrats will hope will end this government shutdown. But things have been running behind schedule here, and the delays may threaten to extend the standoff in Congress.
The Honorable Nancy Pelosi of the state of California has received 220.
Amidst the happy children here for the mock swearing in of their relatives,
Nancy Pelosi,
I extend to you this gavel.
The new speaker was all smiles after winning the House's top job a second time. She offered words of goodwill to the 116th Congress.
I pledge that this Congress will be transparent, bipartisan, and unifying, that we will seek to reach across the aisle in this chamber and across divisions across our nation.
Similar feel-good bromides were offered up from the second highest vote getter, new Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
We're now entering a period of divided government, but that is no excuse for gridlock or inaction.
But reality suggests the first divided government of the Trump administration will not be as rosy as leaders hope.
There is no reason why the president should punish all of these people because of his own partial ego.
The partial government shutdown is now in its 13th day. The political parties unable to find common ground to put 800,000 federal workers back on the job. The Democrats plan to quickly pass legislation to reopen the government. It included one bill to fund 6 government agencies, another to fund the Department of Homeland Security, but no money for a border wall, meaning it is dead on arrival in the Senate.
And let me say it again. The Senate will not take up any proposal that does not have a real chance of passing this chamber and getting a presidential signature. So let's not waste the time.
All Leader McConnell needs to do to reopen the government is to bring to the floor the legislation that he and nearly every other Republican senator already supports.
Still, Pelosi vowed to bring it to the House floor today anyway, ensuring another failure of bipartisanship. Others remain hopeful, noting that with her speakership secured, Pelosi no longer needs to cater to the left wing of her party.
I think once we get through the leadership elections here today, I think there's a deal to be struck here, and we will get it done. And we have to get it done. This is untenable.
And we just learned moments ago that Speaker Pelosi will be holding her first news conference at 7 p.m. tonight here in the Capitol. Perhaps she will expound upon some interesting comments she made this morning when she said that President Trump should not be impeached for political reasons. But she added we need to await the findings of the Mueller investigation.
All right. A lot on the plate. Doug McKelway, thank you for that. You just heard from Kevin McCarthy, who was nominated for House Speaker by Wyoming Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who, as conference chair, is the third-ranking Republican in the House. Listen.
Leader McCarthy led us in passing legislation to secure our borders, keep our nation safe, and the devastating practice of sanctuary cities, and yes, Madam Clerk, build the wall.
And Congresswoman Cheney joins us live from Capitol Hill tonight. Good evening.
The equivalent of some...
It's good to have you tonight. You were speaking for Kevin McCarthy, knowing full well he was unlikely to get the votes to become Speaker, but is now obviously the minority leader. This was Nancy Pelosi's day. She told NBC that the president doesn't know how to deal with a powerful woman. Were you surprised by that comment? And what is your party's approach now to her as Speaker?
You know, in my experience, powerful women ought to be concerned about the security of the nation. And the fact that, you know, we're still playing these political games when we absolutely have got to secure the border. We're seeing thousands of people come across that border, attempt to come across the border illegally, significant increases in the numbers who are attempting to do that. In the last 48 hours or so, we've seen attacks on our border guards on the southern border. We've got to secure the border. And so I think, you know, this really, at this point, is about keeping women secure, keeping men secure, and doing what's right for the country. And the Speaker, I understand that she was hesitant to move forward on this until she secured the votes on the floor. She's done that now, and we really hope, for the sake of the country, that the Democrats will stop playing these political games.
The president made that case in the White House briefing room a short time ago. Let's take a quick listen.
I have never had so much support as I have in the last week over my stance for border security without a very strong form of barrier. Call it what you will, but without a wall, you cannot have border security. We've never had more people wanting to come to the United States, and that has to do with the economy and has to do with a lot of other things. We're doing great as a country.
It seemed like a forceful case from the commander-in-chief, but you helped craft the Republican Party message. Were you surprised that White House officials didn't get the president out there sooner? For the last couple of weeks, you had Nancy Pelosi in Hawaii, and you've had Republicans like Karl Rove saying, why isn't the president using the bully pulpit?
Look, I think the president has been using the bully pulpit. I think that it's impossible to be confused at this point about the fact that the president wants to secure the border. Anybody who is confused is just not listening. I don't think the president could have been any clearer in terms of how important it is. The American people don't want to see these games. They don't want to see a situation where 25% of our government is shut down. You know, the appropriations bills that the Democrats are putting on the floor today include things like stripping out all of the protections, the Mexico City, so-called Mexico City protections that protect life, that prevent U.S. taxpayer money from being used to support international aid programs that would allow abortion. So, of course, we are not going to support that. And the Democrats, again, it's political partisanship and games. The American people are sick of it, and frankly, they want to see the border secure. So we're going to continue to work to fight for that. I was pleased to see Leader McConnell make clear that, you know, the Democrats right now are just on a fool's errand to try to make a statement while we put the security of the nation at risk. And I think that's untenable.
You say Democrats are playing games. Take a listen to a sampling of what some Democrats have said just in the last 24 to 48 hours.
She'll cut your head off and you won't even know you're bleeding. That's all you need to know about her.
Much like Hitler took over the Nazi Party, Trump has taken over the Republican Party.
My New Year's resolution is to make sure that the Republican Party dies.
On top of all of that, you have the speaker telling NBC yesterday, no, 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 there'll be no wall. On top of all that rhetoric, what do you make of all this?
I think they ought to keep talking, because I think the more the American people see how radical and how out of touch the Democrats are, the more they're going to regret the fact that the Democrats are now in control of the House of Representatives. You know, we face huge challenges in this country, huge challenges from a national security perspective, and we've got this economy that's booming because President Trump put policies in place like the tax cuts, working with us in the Republican side of the House, like regulatory reform, rolling back the just strangling regulations we saw during the Obama era. We got to keep that going. And I think the more the Democrats are out there sounding as radical and frankly socialist as many of their members, especially some of their incoming members, are, the better it is for the Republicans and the better it is for the country, because people will see the choice that they've got to make in 2020 and they'll want to get back to actually accomplishing things for the nation, not on the far left fringe of politics.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney, a Republican leader in the new House. We appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thanks for having me, Ed. Right. Good to be with you.
Meanwhile, news that broke last night about bad iPhone sales from Apple spilled into today to spark another rough day on Wall Street. Tech stocks lost 5%, their worst day in 7 years. The Dow tumbled 660 points. The S&P 500 fell 62. NASDAQ dropped 202. Let's get some analysis now from Susan Lee of the Fox Business Network. She joins us live from New York. Good evening, Susan. What in the world is going on?
Well, Ed, the world's first trillion-dollar company saw its worst day in 6 years, wiping out $75 billion in market value, which is the equivalent of some Fortune 500 companies like General Electric and also Qualcomm. Apple getting crushed after it did something that it hasn't done in 15 years, saying it will make less money than initially thought. The company blames it on slower iPhone sales in China. The Chinese economy is sharply slowing down, confirmed by the weakest retail sales in 15 years last month, and Apple's being crowded out of the Chinese market by local players like Huawei, which overtook Apple as the world's second largest smartphone shipper. And with no bottom in sight for the Chinese slowdown, the White House has a warning for American companies.
So yes, the Chinese economy is slowing, and one of the reasons why markets are responding the way they are is that people are downgrading their earnings forecasts for folks who have a lot of business in China. And make no mistake, the Chinese economy is on a path that we haven't seen in decades.
Another drag on Apple sales in China, the ongoing trade dispute between the world's two largest economies. President Trump tweeting today, the United States Treasury has taken in many billions of dollars from the tariffs that we are charging China and other countries. We are doing well in various trade negotiations currently going on. But there are concerns of what it means for other firms if arguably the most successful U.S. company operating in China is having a tough time in the current conditions. Ed?
Some big questions tonight. Susan Lee from New York. Thanks for joining us. A federal judge has ruled a lawsuit by author and political commentator Jerome Corsi against the special counsel for what Corsi alleges is a pattern of illegal surveillance will be assigned to a federal judge randomly. Corsi had asked for Judge Richard Leone to take the case himself because it is related to other cases that judge is already handling. His attorney has brought on which the judge has ruled. Those cases involve alleged illegal surveillance by the NSA and other government entities. Judge Leone says the cases are not sufficiently related and that he did not want want to encourage what's known as judge shopping. The first piece of legislation to be considered by the new Look House proposes billions of dollars on cybersecurity, and it sets up an immediate fight with the president. Our correspondent Jillian Turner reports tonight on how the partial government shutdown could be affecting the government's ability to keep you safe tonight.
Have short-term funding for Homeland Security, continue the debate, and see where we are in February.
Cybersecurity officials say when it comes to Homeland Security, the government shutdown's hitting the nation's cyber defenses hard. They worry with each passing day things like the electric grid, election infrastructure, and classified government programs become more vulnerable to foreign hacks. The federal government's major cybersecurity offices, those that defend the U.S. against attacks from enemies like Russia, China, and North Korea, are left underfunded and in some cases without staff.
That means that we are losing step with our adversaries who are proceeding full steam ahead.
According to agencies, Homeland Security, 45% of cyber personnel furloughed from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency. Director of National Intelligence, 60% of personnel furloughed. National Institute of Standards and Technology hit hardest of all with 85% of personnel furloughed. Some of these critical cyber offices have even been forced to shutter their websites. What all of this means in practical terms is that some of the government's key cyber functions can't be carried out. Things like tracking cyber threats to the U.S. from across the world, gathering cyber intelligence about adversaries, and upholding the nation's basic cyber standards. Experts emphasize what they call continuity of operations. They say the key to good cybersecurity is constant vigilance with no lapses.
Every day that we are not out there working with our private sector critical infrastructure owners and operators is a day that we are losing ground against our adversaries.
One brand new agency known as CISA, created to coordinate all cybersecurity efforts between the U.S. government and the U.S. private sector, has virtually been put on hold. An official who works there told Fox News CISA has now seized some of the nation's critical cybersecurity operations. Ed?
Jillian, thank you. Up next, there's something brand new on the far side of the moon. We'll tell you what it is. And also take a look at China trying to challenge America's supremacy in space. But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 32 in Chicago, as one of the most powerful city council members in Chicago history, is now charged with attempted extortion. Alderman Ed Burke is accused of what a federal complaint calls corruptly soliciting business for his private law firm. If convicted, he could face up to 20 years behind bars. Fox 45 in Baltimore, as that city's former mayor, Martin O'Malley, who also served as governor of Maryland, says he'll not make a second run for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. O'Malley says he's backing the former Texas Senate candidate, Beto O'Rourke. O'Malley abandoned his 2016 campaign after a disappointing finish in Iowa. And this is a live look at Long Beach, California from Fox 11. The big story there tonight, the fight between the LA Unified School District and its teachers union is heating up as the strike date of January 10th approaches. Last month, the two sides apparently agreed on a 6% raise, but the union is also demanding smaller classes and more staff. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. As we have all week, the show celebrates 10 years with Bret Baier at the helm. We have some friends of the show congratulating Bret.
I've got a PhD in Bret Baier. I live walking distance from Bret Baier. My kids went to the same school as Bret Baier's kids, and we share an office wall, Bret Baier and I. So if anybody is qualified to say Bret Baier is a genuinely good guy, it's me. And that's what I'm saying. And that's why I'm so excited that 10 years he's been at the helm of that show. Fair, balanced, and unafraid the whole time. Congratulations, Bret.
Congratulations, Bret. You've done just great.
Congratulations, Bret, for 10 years on Special Report. Man, it seems like yesterday. Here's to 10 more. All the best.
Tonight, the lawyer for an American citizen detained in Russia on an espionage charge says he's asking for his client to finally be released on bail. Former Marine Paul Whelan is said to be enduring custody well. He was arrested Friday. U.S. Ambassador to Russia John Huntsman Jr. met with Whelan at a Moscow prison yesterday. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia says it will seek the death penalty against 5 suspects in the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Prosecutors announced today 11 suspects in the slaying. They attended their first court hearing with lawyers. The kingdom previously said 18 people have been arrested. Saudi officials continue to deny allegations that the crown prince was behind the killing. And for the first time ever tonight, there was a spacecraft on the far side of the moon. But it did not come from America. Instead, it is the latest achievement in China's space program. Our correspondent Kristen Fisher tells us tonight about a serious challenge to what has long been America's supremacy in space.
This is the first picture ever taken from the surface of the far side of the moon, and it was taken by the Chinese Chang'e 4 probe. The feat puts China on the map as a global space power, on par with Russia and the United States. NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine called it an impressive accomplishment.
If we're going to compare awesomeness, I think it's important to understand that what China just did is a first in human history, and that's awesome. But it's also true that the United States of America just flew closer to the sun than any country on Earth, and we are now in orbit around Bennu, which is an asteroid in deep space.
But even though the U.S. is still the undisputed leader in exploring deep space, the Chinese lunar landing is a challenge to future American dominance in space, something President Trump has promised to protect with his Space Force.
We must have American dominance in space.
President Trump put the U.S. back on track to return to the moon in about a decade, and the Chinese have announced plans to do the same. A former NASA administrator has worried that the Chinese could win that race, but not the current one.
What we're trying to do now is something entirely different. This time when we go, we're going to stay.
The U.S. also faces threats in space from Russia and Iran. Iran has publicly announced plans to launch 3 rockets into space in the coming months. And today, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned the U.S. will not stand by and watch the Iranian regime's destructive policies place international stability and security at risk.
Now, Iranian officials say they're simply trying to launch 3 satellites into space. But the U.S. and its allies worry that it's a disguise for a ballistic missile program. Ed?
Thank you, Kristen. Up next, our Addicted in America series focuses on marijuana, which is being legalized in more and more states across America.
Brett Baer, congratulations on 10 years. Here's to 10 more.
Yeah, really proud of the leadership you give us in Washington. As you like to say, it's like drinking from a fire hose, and no one does it better. So congratulations, 10 years. Here's to 10 more, Brett. Congrats.
Brett, happy 10th anniversary. A huge congratulations to you on an enormously successful 10 years of Special Report, and best wishes for all the next decades to come. Happy anniversary, buddy.
Tonight we continue our important series Addicted in America with a look at the implications behind the growing popularity of legalized marijuana. Rolling Stone magazine calls 2019 the year of weed. More states continue to bring pot into the legal mainstream, but with that comes some growing concerns about possible addiction. Here's our correspondent, Jeff Paul.
Despite a wave of legalization at the state level, marijuana is still a Schedule I illicit drug under federal law. One reason why is the high potential for abuse.
We have a lot of marijuana addicts that started with marijuana and went on to harder drugs or just got addicted to marijuana alone.
Dr. Howard Samuels is the founder of the Hills Treatment Center in Los Angeles.
If you smoke weed once or twice a month, it's not going to be harmful at all. Pot addiction is an obsession where you do it first thing in the morning, you do it all afternoon, you do it at night, and it numbs your feelings.
The CDC estimates about 1 in 10 marijuana users become addicted. That number rises to 1 in 6 for those under 18.
People see it to be more benign, but I definitely think that it still has destructive qualities.
This 18-year-old began smoking at 13.
It was easier to just feel high than to feel the pressures of everyday life.
Now clean, he sought help from the same type of rehab those struggling with alcohol, opioids, and illegal narcotics typically undergo. So did this 27-year-old father of 2 who started abusing marijuana and alcohol at 14.
I started putting the use of drugs and alcohol before my priorities. And so that's when I knew I had a problem and I couldn't stop.
Experts say the notion of marijuana being less addictive than other drugs is a myth.
If an individual develops tolerance, if they need more of the substance over time in order to continue to get the same high, or if they get less high by using the same amount.
The treatment is really about learning how to not be so self-destructive anymore in your life.
And like other addictions, often the first step of recovery is recognizing the problem.
I was just at a point to where I was like, I got to do something with my life. You know, I got these kids, I got responsibilities, you know, as well as myself being, and I'm better than that.
Marijuana is now either recreationally or medically legal in more than half the states. While there is potential for addiction among some, the CDC and American Medical Association say it can be therapeutic for others, like those with chronic pain or nausea from chemo. Ed?
Thank you, Jeff. Tomorrow, our series concludes with a look at gambling addiction. Well, Congress is open, but much of the federal government remains closed. We'll talk about the new power dynamic right here in Washington and whether Democrats might be in danger of overreaching. That's what we'll discuss with our panel when we come back.
You have been successful because you are the hardest working journalist I know. Special Report is fair. It is must-see television in our household. I can remember when we first met, we traveled the globe covering the Pentagon after the 9/11 attacks. Congratulations on your continued success. And here's to another decade of Special Report at the top.
As someone who witnessed protection.
Let me be clear, House Democrats are down with NDP.
We will make America more American by protecting our patriotic, courageous dreamers. If we ever close the door to new Americans, our leadership role in the world will soon be lost. Ronald Reagan.
Republicans will always choose personal freedom over government control.
I just want to start off by congratulating Nancy Pelosi on being elected Speaker of the House. It's a very, very great achievement. And hopefully we're going to work together and we're going to get lots of things done. And I think it's actually going to work out. I think it'll be a little bit different than a lot of people are thinking.
A sampling of a big day here in Washington. Let's bring in our panel. Tom Rogan, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at the Federalist, and Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post. By the way, I may have to interrupt you because in a couple of moments because the new speaker is about to have a news conference on the Hill. We are waiting for that. We'll dip in whenever she starts speaking any moment now. But in the meantime, Charles, what do you think about the president saying we're going to surprise a lot of people. We're going to get a lot of stuff done?
It would be a surprise if he got a lot done with Nancy Pelosi, but, you know, it's an olive branch that he has extended to her before. There was the famous Chuck and Nancy Have a Great Idea episode a while back. Yes, it didn't last that long. But I think it's part of a strategy the White House has finally gotten around to of attempting to show the president is the one who wants to compromise and that the Democrats are the ones who are being intransigent here. And of course, that's all part of the larger game here in Washington, which is not about any kind of policy substance, but the politics of the shutdown, which is a blame game. And interestingly, I think both parties are a little uncertain right now about who will get blamed for this. They don't have a lot of good polling data to rely on. Public opinion about shutdown seems to be changing in terms of who automatically gets blamed. It used to be more the Republicans, not so much anymore. And so part of the reason I don't think the shutdown will end soon is I think they're both still feeling their way about how the public is reacting.
Molly, Charles hit on something interesting, which is there does usually historically there's been sort of this knee-jerk, the Republicans are to blame. And in this case, it seems a little bit murkier.
I think it all comes down to the word blame. You blame people for things that are bad. So whether you think the government being shut down is good or bad, if it's done for the sake of dealing with border security, says a lot about your position on this issue to begin with. The other issue is, it's true that you see some electoral consequences for shutdowns. We're 2 years away from the next election. That's a really long time during which everyone will forget everything that's happening at this moment. So I do agree that it could be a long shutdown, and because it has to be long, because until there's actual pain, nobody seems to be coming to the table.
And yet, Tom, today the president was tweeting that this shutdown is all about 2020. That might fit his narrative because, you know, when you hear Democrats saying that, they keep saying that there are polls suggesting the public doesn't want the wall. In fact, this president ran on the wall in 2016, and whether they like it or not, he won.
You know, we were discussing this, I think, the last time I was on the
the panel, and it's that point that President Trump clearly has a manifest interest in being seen to take a stand here, because as he goes towards re-election, the people that he most needs to consolidate are his base. It's always the case with the president, and on this it's something so tangible, so obvious, which is why I think you see the theatrical element, the president's instinct for the Game of Thrones, the poster he put out earlier on Instagram that the wall is coming. This narrative I think the president gets is so instrumentally important to his own electoral possibilities in 2020 that he cannot easily back away from it.
And there is a new power dynamic, to get at what Charles was saying about who's going to get the blame. It's not Republicans running everything now. Democrats have some responsibility to govern, and another issue they may confront, not just with the shutdown, is the potential for overreach with investigations of the president, but also take a listen to one of their new members as well as the incoming speaker.
PAYGO is economically irresponsible. It doesn't mean that we should block an agenda. It doesn't mean that we should be obstructive. It doesn't mean that we should, it's not about defying leadership or defying the effort that's been put in the rules. But I think it's important that we have a conversation about why PAYGO should not be part of a Democratic agenda.
Everything indicates that a president can be indicted after he is no longer president.
Would Robert Mueller come back and say, I am seeking an indictment?
I think that is an open discussion.
Open discussion, she says, whether the president can be indicted. Let's pick that apart. Molly, you start with the spending issue that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's an arcane Washington budget fight, but basically she was saying we don't want PAYGO, which is spending cuts before you spend more money, like Medicare for all. That suggests this new Democratic majority wants to spend a whole lot of money.
Right. It makes sense that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't want that rule in place because she has a very aggressive, progressive agenda and doesn't want to be dealing with how to pay for it. But what I think is interesting is what this shows us about the very difficult situation that Nancy Pelosi is in. I mean, no one should count her out. Just the fact that she won this race again, even though you had so many people campaigning and promising that they wouldn't vote for her, and then turning around and doing just that, voting for her, shows that she should not be counted out. But even more so than her previous time as Speaker, she is wrangling a very disparate coalition of people. And a lot of people came and voted for Democrats because they were suburban people who didn't want to vote for Trump. Are they going to be on board with a really aggressive, more socialistic agenda that is where the excitement of the Democratic base is? And how does Nancy Pelosi keep that in check?
Usually heading into 2020, a new Speaker might want to steer a more centrist course, Charles, but also, Molly makes a good point. I covered it when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker first time, and one of her lieutenants was Rahm Emanuel, who, as you know, was a moderate inside the Clinton White House and then in the House as well. School uniforms, and he wasn't out there on the left wing. He was trying to steer a moderate course.
Yeah, but American politics have totally changed since then. You have the populist insurgencies in both parties, the rise of Bernie Sanders. All those old rules don't apply. I have to say, I think that the controversy about PAYGO is a little rich, considering that the Republican Party has just cut taxes by $1.5 trillion over 10 years with no attempt to pay for that. And I think part of the damage that's done by this sort of blowout of the deficit under a Republican administration, it gives the Democrats a license to say we don't care about the deficit either.
Real quick, Tom, on the spending issue, because that's something you talked about, the base for the president. Well, his conservative base wants to see spending cuts here. The Republicans were just running the House and Senate and didn't cut any spending.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason that the Republican unity going into 2020 is going to have to be built around some measure of spending restraint, I think. The president wants the wall, but the infrastructure idea, the infrastructure spending with Democrats, I just don't see that coming, because the Democrats are going to ask for too much.
Although the wall at $5 billion, at least the down payment, is a very small part of the federal budget. Absolutely. All right, we'll be back in just a moment with more melodrama in the markets.
Brett, congratulations to you and your team on 10 years of Special Report. You sacrificed, worked hard to have 10 years of incredible success. I wish you continued success on an amazing show. Congratulations.
Congratulations.